First question is, as of today, in 2018, with all the data we have and everything we know, how would you use, or where and when would you use SIRS and SOFA, and for what purpose?
So I'm going to start with this one since I am in no way qualified to answer the machine learning questions that you're going to ask Matt. So I think SIRS and QSOFA, obviously both are more useful in the non-ICU setting than in the ICU setting. Lucky for us, most people develop sepsis outside the ICU. In fact, most people develop sepsis outside the hospital and present with it. I think the appropriate use for SIRS is as a trigger to look for organ dysfunction. I think the most appropriate use for QSOFA is as a trigger to look for organ dysfunction. Sometimes the organ dysfunction with QSOFA is right in front of you because the patient is obtunded or encephalopathic, and so you can see right off the bat. SIRS obviously is a more sensitive detection mechanism, and it's going to be wrong more times than QSOFA on whether the patient actually does have sepsis. Nevertheless, my thoughts on both of these are, if I see either one of them, I go looking for an infection. I need to know that there's an infection causing them because neither one of these things is specific to infection. They both are found in a myriad of different possible ways and possible underlying circumstances. So neither one of these is specific for infection. So you got to go looking to see, is it infection causing either one of these? What I think is that either one should prompt a search for organ dysfunction. SIRS, no, I think the way I want to say it is, if I see QSOFA, you better look fast because QSOFA happens much more proximally to death or needing to move to an ICU than does infection with SIRS. I think Matt has some thoughts on the issue as well.
Don't say what you told me earlier, right? We'll go slow here, right? Don't break our hearts.
Right.
Okay. I'm gingerly giving the mic to him.
Oh, I appreciate that. You know, I really think that SIRS and QSOFA have potentially complementary roles. I think that SIRS could be very useful in determining which patients are infected. If I see someone with low-grade fever, tachycardia, I start thinking about infection if I haven't already. Whereas with QSOFA, I think QSOFA has clearly been shown to be a better risk stratifier. And in some studies, they've actually shown that one of QSOFA is just as sensitive as two or more SIRS. So, I would use QSOFA more as a risk stratifier or other tools such as the modified early warning score or NEWS, these other early warning scores that can be used to determine how aggressive and how quickly do we need to move on someone who's potentially infected.
Okay, so you still feel, as it stands today, there's a little bit of a role for the warning systems and for scores. Fair enough. All right, so what Dr. Churpek talked about today was the role of AI and machine learning and big data in creating scores and predictive strategies for sepsis, right? And their group has done a lot of research in this field, and you've shown that you can actually build algorithms that will predict it, maybe right now within your own hospital, but eventually you can make it more generalizable. Is that accurate? Would that sum up what you talked about today?
Right, so our group develops clinical prediction models to identify critically ill patients, and also we're working on models to predict infection. Our algorithm is running in over 10 hospitals at this point for early detection of critical illness in general, and we're interested in seeing how it can apply to sepsis specifically.
Perfect. So I have bought into it. I think most viewers have bought into it. I think that's where the future is, and we need to accept it. My question for you is this. What are just two things that you would worry about as big data becomes more prevalent in different disease states, two things that you would caution people, hey, watch out for this, or this is where you might want to be careful with adopting new technology?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that the first thing is to really think about what you're actually trying to predict and making sure you're tying that prediction to an actual action that you want clinicians to do. I think the challenge is in this day and age, we have access to enormous amounts of data, and now with the EHRs, we're having access to a significant amount of healthcare data as well. And we can get into what I think is not a good place where we just try to predict anything we can predict,
right,
just to get high accuracy. Right. I really think we should identify what are the real gaps in care, and then once you have identified that gap in care, then identify models that can help improve that gap in care. So I think that's the first thing, just to not make a model for any condition that you have. I think the second thing is to think about the culture of the place that you're trying to implement the model in, and what is the current workflow around that problem. Because I think that if you just turn an algorithm on without thinking about the culture and the workload and workflow of that one place, you're just going to turn on an algorithm that will just get ignored and silenced over and over. And so I think that's the other thing, is that there's a lot of hype around big data and machine learning, but the most important thing and the hardest thing is not developing the model. It's really getting a model that is usable and that clinicians will use to actually improve patient outcomes.
All right. And last words, Dr. Simpson. With your experience, I know, we're all on the same page here, but last words, where do you think we're going to go with this?
With which?
With all of this,
with all of this.
Early warning systems.
Actually, this is what I think, and as you know, I have another role with the federal government that I could tell you about, but I would then have to dispose of you. But
that's hard. But 260 pounds. Just want to let
you know. So I think there's a large degree of interest at a lot of different levels on national repositories of data, perhaps not even just repositories, but national resources that could input real-time data from patients, be able to develop algorithms like Matt has done, is continuing to do for serious problems such as, and in fact I know that sepsis is a problem that our government is interested in and would like for us to have better mechanisms for early recognition. And I think we believe at that level that there is substantial available data out there if it could be curated appropriately. And I think curated appropriately is probably the big issue here, both so that it remains HIPAA protected, so that the hospitals remain anonymous and protected, but also so that the data is wisely applied and wisely used in the ways that Matt was just talking about. But I really think that's the direction that we are going to move. Some of the other stuff that we are interested in is such things as biomarkers. What we don't have right now for sepsis, as you're well aware, is a particular biomarker that is the troponin of sepsis, if you will. The thing that if you draw it and it's high, a person has sepsis. If you draw it and it's low, they don't. Whether any one biomarker is going to ever do that, I really can't say. But I think that there are potential combinations of biomarkers that, by the way, I'll be talking about in the annual update on sepsis on Tuesday afternoon. But there are other combinations of biomarkers that hold promise in terms of their predictive ability. One thing that I will say, though, that I firmly believe is that if we come down to biomarkers for being the actual diagnostic tool for sepsis, you're always going to have a clinician recognizing that a patient has an infection and a patient might have sepsis in one way or another, and whether that way is via machine learning algorithms or whether that way is because they detect SIRS and infection or they detect Q-SOFA and infection, we don't know yet, but it's always going to boil down to a human-to-human interaction one way or another to both diagnose and to take action.
Perfect. And can I just pull in June, who's an integral, she's the video lead for the social media working group, and we're so happy to have both of you. I think there's a future for both humans and machines to work together. Let's not have the machines eat us, and thank you so much for taking time out.
Viren, thank you very much for the tweets and for the interview.
Take care.
Appreciate it.